My brother laughed. When his son pushed my niece down the stairs. When I took her away, he came for blood. When I arrived at my brother's house for my niece's birthday, I had no idea that what I was about to see would change my life forever. The sound of muffled sobs drifted down from the second floor. At first, I thought it was just the usual childhood tantrum, but as I stepped inside, something felt off. The air in the house was heavy, the kind of stillness that made your skin prickle. I followed the quiet whimpers up the stairs and pushed open Lily's bedroom door. There she was, kneeling beside the trash bin, her small hands trembling as she picked up the shredded remains of the stuffed bunny I had given her last Christmas. Little bits of fluff and fabric clung to her fingers as fresh tears rolled down her pale cheeks. My heart clenched. Lily? I crouched beside her, my voice barely above a whisper. She flinched but didn't look up. He tore it up, she mumbled, voice cracking. Ethan tore it up. Of course he did. I glanced at the open door, half expecting to see my nephew's smug face peeking in, but the hallway was empty. I exhaled sharply, my hands curling into fists. This wasn't the first time Ethan had done something cruel to his sister. It wouldn't be the last either. But what made my stomach churn was knowing that no one in this house would care. I'm Jane. I'm 29, a freelance novelist who barely scrapes by, but I make it work. I live alone in a tiny apartment with more books than furniture, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. I love kids. Maybe because I never had any of my own. Maybe because I've always felt like an outsider in my own family. I don't fit into their polished, picture-perfect world. I never have. Michael, my older brother, is the golden child. Always has been. At 38, he's successful, powerful, and utterly self-absorbed. The kind of man who shakes your hand with a smile while figuring out how to use you. He married Rebecca, a woman just like him, cold, calculating, and obsessed with appearances. And together, they had Ethan and Lily. Ethan, at 12, is a miniature version of his father, entitled Cruel. The world bends for him, and he knows it. He gets away with everything because Michael sees him as the perfect heir, the pride of the family. Lily, on the other hand, is different. At 9 years old, she's quiet, thoughtful, too soft for this household. She loves to draw, loves stories, and always seems to be hiding behind something, behind a book, behind her hair, behind her own silence. She's careful with her words, careful with her steps. Because in this house, being noticed isn't always a good thing. I've watched it for years. The way Michael dismisses her. The way Rebecca barely acknowledges her existence. The way Ethan torments her, knowing no one will ever stop him. Once, I saw Ethan shove Lily so hard she hit the floor, right in front of their parents. Michael just laughed and ruffled Ethan's hair like he was proud. Rebecca didn't even blink. And Lily, she picked herself up, dusted off her dress, and didn't make a sound. That was the moment I realized. She knew. She knew no one would stand up for her, except maybe me. A week before her birthday, Lily won her school's spelling bee. I was ecstatic. She had spent weeks practicing, writing words over and over in her little notebook, sounding them out under her breath. She had worked for this, earned this. Her teacher sent home a glowing report, praising her effort, her determination. And when she got home, do you know what happened? Michael barely looked up from his laptop. Good job, he muttered, as if she had just told him she set the table. Rebecca didn't even react. And Ethan? He smirked and muttered, it's not that big of a deal. I saw Lily's smile falter. I saw the light dim in her eyes as she swallowed whatever words she wanted to say. She just nodded and quietly walked away. That night, I called her. You proud of yourself, kid? I asked. She hesitated. I think so. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. You should be. She didn't respond right away. Then, softly, she asked, do you think they're proud of me? I felt something crack inside me, because I knew the answer, and I knew she did too. I never thought a simple gift could be the thing that shattered everything. The day before Ethan's birthday, I took both him and Lily out to pick their presents. I'd done this every year, trying to be fair, letting them choose something they truly wanted. Ethan, unsurprisingly, went straight for the most expensive thing he could find, a limited edition video game set. He barely looked at me as he tossed it onto the counter, knowing I'd pay for it without question. Lily, on the other hand, took her time. She wandered through the aisles with careful steps, running her fingers over different toys like she was afraid to want anything too much. And then she saw it. A soft, white plush bunny, the kind with floppy ears and tiny button eyes. She stopped in her tracks, staring at it as if it were the most magical thing in the world. I picked it up and placed it in her hands. "Do you like it?" Her fingers curled around the bunny's fur, and for the first time that day she smiled. A real, genuine smile. "It's perfect." When we got back to the house, she hugged that stuffed animal to her chest like it was a treasure. Ethan, sitting on the couch with his arms crossed, gave it a single disdainful glance before looking away. He didn't say anything at the time, but I should have known. I should have seen it coming. The party was filled with laughter, but Lily was locked away upstairs, alone. When I arrived at Michael's house for Ethan's birthday, I expected chaos, balloons, loud music, kids running around. What I didn't expect was for Lily to be missing. "Where's Lily?" I asked as Rebecca handed me a glass of wine. She barely looked up. "She's upstairs. She's being punished." I frowned. Punished for what? Rebecca sighed like I was exhausting her. She threw a fit over the TV remote. Ethan wanted to play his game and she wouldn't let him. That's it? She needs to learn boundaries, Jane. Besides, we don't want her ruining Ethan's special day. I set the wine down, untouched, and made my way upstairs. When I reached Lily's door, I knocked gently. "Sweetheart, it's me." Silence. Then the soft sound of shuffling feet. The door creaked open, revealing Lily's small, tear-streaked face. "My friends came," she whispered. "They tried to say happy birthday, but Mom made them leave." My stomach twisted. I knelt down, brushing a stray hair from her face. "You didn't do anything wrong." She only nodded, eyes dropping to the floor, shoulders curled inward like she was trying to make herself smaller. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight, and that was when I heard it, the loud thud of footsteps. Ethan. He stormed into the room without hesitation. Lily barely had time to react before he grabbed the white bunny from her hands. "What are you— Ethan, stop!" I reached for him, but he yanked away. Lily clutched at his arm. "Give it back," Ethan sneered, holding it just out of her reach. "You don't deserve it." And then, with one swift, deliberate motion, he tore the bunny in half. The sound of ripping fabric filled the room. Lily let out a choked sob as stuffing spilled onto the floor. She fell to her knees, frantically gathering the torn pieces, as if she could somehow put it back together. "No. No, no, no." Ethan just laughed. Something inside me snapped. Before I could stop myself, I grabbed Ethan by the arm and spun him around to face me. "What the hell is wrong with you?" My voice shook with rage. His smirk faltered for half a second before returning. "It's just a stupid toy." It wasn't stupid to her. Lily's shoulders shook as she picked up the last piece of fabric. Her tiny hands trembled as she pressed them to her chest. And then, as if things couldn't get worse, Michael and Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "Lily," Michael's voice was sharp. "What the hell is all this crying about?" Rebecca's eyes flicked to the destroyed bunny, then to her son. And to my absolute horror, she smiled. "It's her fault," Ethan said casually. "She was screaming over nothing." Michael crossed his arms. "Lily, pick that up and throw it away." Lily's head snapped up, eyes wide. "But now." Tears slipped silently down her cheeks, but she obeyed. Slowly, painfully, she picked up each piece and placed it in the trash. I felt my hands clench into fists. "She is a child," I said, my voice low, trembling with barely contained fury. "Your child. And you're treating her like she's nothing." Michael's gaze hardened. "Don't start. Jane." "No," I snapped, stepping closer. "You don't get to tell me what to do. You are tormenting your own daughter, and for what? To stroke Ethan's ego?" Rebecca scoffed. "Oh, please, you don't have kids, Jane. You don't get to judge how we parent." I let out a bitter laugh. "This isn't parenting. This is cruelty." Michael's face darkened. "If you have such a problem with how we raise our children, maybe you shouldn't come around anymore." For a long moment, I just stood there. Then I turned to Ethan. He was still smirking, still confident that he was untouchable. I reached into my bag, pulled out the neatly wrapped box, the video game he had picked out the day before. I held it up, staring him straight in the eye, and then I lowered my arm. "You don't deserve this." My voice was calm, cold. Ethan's mouth fell open. "What?" I turned to Michael. "You think I'm punishing him? Number. I'm teaching him something you never will, that actions have consequences." Michael's jaw tightened. "Jane." But I was already stepping past him, already walking away. I didn't look back, not at Ethan's stunned expression, not at Rebecca's smirk, not even at Michael's fury, because none of them mattered. Only one thing mattered. I didn't know it then, but that moment would push everything to the edge. And I had no idea that just one day later, Lily would be coming home with me. For good. The next morning, just as I was sipping my first cup of coffee, my phone rang. I didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. I inhaled deeply before answering. Michael's voice was unsettlingly calm. "If you think Lily is so pitiful, why don't you take her for a few days? Let her cool off." I froze. Michael never let Lily stay over. Ever. He always made excuses. Too busy, too disruptive, too inconvenient. And now, after last night's fight, he was just handing her over. Something was wrong. "Rebecca's okay with that?" I tested. A pause. Then, a chuckle. "She's the one who suggested it." That was all I needed to hear. Michael never made decisions without Rebecca's approval. And Rebecca? She wouldn't agree to this unless there was a reason. A very bad one. My stomach nodded. They were hiding something, and I needed to find out what. When I arrived at their house, Rebecca opened the door with a slow, deliberate smile. "She's coming," she said coolly, stepping aside. Footsteps creaked on the stairs. Lily appeared, shoulders hunched, wearing a faded sweater that swallowed her frame. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale. She clutched a small, tattered backpack in both hands. "And nothing else?" I frowned. "Sweetheart, aren't you bringing any toys? Clothes?" Lily only shook her head. Rebecca chuckled behind me. "She doesn't need much, does she? You've got plenty of stuff at your place, don't you, Jane?" I turned, staring at her. She held my gaze, unbothered, smug. A chill crawled down my spine. I bent down to Lily's level, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Are you ready, baby?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second, then gave me the tiniest nod. I took her hand. And as we stepped outside, I had the strangest feeling that I had just stolen something. Or rather, rescued it. I tried to make it a happy day. We stopped at McDonald's on the way home. I let Lily pick anything she wanted. She chose a Happy Meal, smiling faintly when she got a small stuffed toy inside. But the smile never quite reached her eyes. That evening, I gave her a new plush. A massive, soft teddy bear, far bigger than the one Ethan had destroyed. Lily hugged it immediately, pressing her face into the fur. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice fragile, like glass. I ruffled her hair. "You're safe here, baby." For the first time all day, she relaxed. Or so I thought. I woke up to the sound of soft whimpering. It took me a moment to register it. The quiet, broken sobs filtering through the apartment. I slipped out of bed and followed the sound to the living room. Lily was curled up on the couch, knees to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around the teddy bear. Her face was buried in the fur, but I could see her shoulders shaking. I knelt beside her. "Sweetheart?" She flinched, then slowly lifted her head. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, filled with something I couldn't quite understand. "Did you have a bad dream?" I asked softly. She shook her head. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "Not a dream." A lump formed in my throat. Not a dream. A memory. I sat beside her, waiting. I wouldn't push her. I'd let her speak when she was ready, and then she did. And what she told me made my blood turn to ice. They said I fell down the stairs. Her voice was quiet but steady. But I didn't fall. I sucked in a breath. Lily's fingers tightened around the bear's fur. Ethan pushed me. I felt my entire body go rigid. She continued, voice hollow, like she'd repeated this story in her head 1,000 times. It was last year. I beat him at chess. He got mad. He told me I wasn't supposed to win. Then, he pushed me. My stomach twisted violently. Your arm? She nodded. It broke. I screamed, but Dad just laughed. Mom didn't even look at me. My hands clenched into fists. I remembered when it happened. Michael had told me she slipped, that she was clumsy. I hadn't believed it then, and now, I felt sick for ever letting them convince me. Lily's eyes flicked up to mine, searching, hesitant. A neighbor took me to the hospital, she whispered. Not my parents. A neighbor, not Michael, not Rebecca. A stranger had shown her more care than her own blood. Tears burned in my eyes, but I forced them back. Lily didn't need my sadness. She needed my strength. I reached out and cupped her small hands in mine. Sweetheart, listen to me. My voice was firm, steady. You are never going back there. Do you hear me? Her lips parted slightly. But, no buts, I interrupted. You're staying with me, forever, if that's what you want. A single tear slid down her cheek. Sayers. Really? I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her close. Really? She melted into me, her little fingers gripping my shirt like a lifeline. I could feel her heart pounding against my chest. For the first time since I took her from that house, she truly let herself cry. And as I held her, listening to her soft, heart-wrenching sobs, one thought burned in my mind. I had thought I could protect Lily by keeping my distance. I had been wrong. If I didn't fight for her now, she might not survive that house long enough for me to get another chance. The moment Lily fell asleep, I grabbed my phone and called my parents. Maybe, just maybe, they would listen. Maybe they would help. But I should have known better. Jane, you're overreacting, my mother sighed. Kids fight all the time. She broke her arm, I snapped. She was bleeding, and Michael laughed. A pause. Then my father's voice, calm and dismissive. That's between them. Siblings roughhouse. That's just how boys are. I felt my hands shake. Dad, Ethan is not just roughhousing, he's tormenting her. Oh, come on, my mother cut in. Lily's always been sensitive. If you coddle her too much, she'll never toughen up. I wanted to scream. They were enabling him. Enabling all of them, just like they always had. I took a breath, forcing myself to steady my voice. So that's it? You're just going to let them keep hurting her? Another long silence. Then my father muttered, She's not your kid. Jane, stay out of it. And with that, they hung up. I sat there, gripping my phone, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I had been clinging to some desperate hope that they'd care, that they'd do something, but they wouldn't. And I was done hoping. If they weren't going to protect Lily, I would. I started making calls. First, to the neighbor who had taken Lily to the hospital, then to her school. The teacher who had pulled me aside months ago, concerned about the bruises on Lily's arms. The school nurse who had noted multiple injuries. They all had stories, pieces of the puzzle I had ignored for too long. One by one, I gathered every shred of evidence I could find. And then I called Michael. We need to talk, I said, face to face. Michael and Rebecca arrived at my apartment that evening, both looking irritated, as if I had pulled them away from something important. I had set everything up, papers neatly arranged on the coffee table, a folder thick with reports, photos, messages, proof of what they had done. Rebecca barely sat down before rolling her eyes. Jane, if this is another one of your... I slid the first photo across the table. A picture of Lily's arm, still swollen and bruised from the fall. Another of her school records listing unexplained injuries. A printed copy of a text from her teacher, expressing concern over her emotional state. Statements from neighbors, detailing the times they heard Lily crying for help. And at the very bottom of the stack, the hospital record. The one that showed Lily's parents had never even been there. I leaned forward, my voice cold. Two choices. One, I send this to Child Protective Services, blast it all over social media, and make sure everyone, including your bosses, knows exactly what kind of parents you are. Michael's jaw tightened. Or two, I continued, sliding a second document toward them. You sign this and give up custody of Lily. Permanently. Silence. Rebecca stared at the papers, her hands trembling. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious. I met Michael's glare without flinching. You do not get to keep hurting her. Michael scoffed, but there was a crack in his confidence. This is ridiculous. You're blowing everything out of proportion. I cut him off. She told me about the stairs. Michael. His nostrils flared, but I didn't stop. She told me you laughed. Something in his expression flickered. Something dark. He lunged forward, reaching for the papers, maybe to rip them apart, maybe to grab me. I didn't care. Because before he could touch anything, I leaned back and gestured toward the corner of the room. His eyes followed my hand, and then he saw it. A small black camera. The red light blinking steadily. Recording. You want to hit me, Michael? My voice was eerily calm. Go ahead, but this time I'll make sure you pay for it. He froze. Rebecca clamped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide with something I had never seen before. Fear. Michael's fists clenched, his face turning a furious shade of red. For a long, tense moment, I thought he might actually do it, that he might throw away whatever dignity he had left and attack me right then and there. But then, slowly, his gaze flicked to the papers, and he knew. He had lost. Rebecca was the first to break. She grabbed the pen with shaking fingers and signed. When she pushed it toward Michael, he hesitated. Michael, she whispered. Just do it. His jaw tightened so much I thought his teeth might break. Then, with a sharp exhale, he snatched the pen and scrawled his name. I took the papers, folded them neatly, and tucked them away. It's done, I said. Rebecca wiped her face with the back of her hand. So that's it? She let out a bitter laugh. You get to play the hero and we just walk away? I didn't smile. You don't deserve her, and you know it. Michael stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. You think this is over? His voice was low, venomous. You have no idea what you've started. I met his gaze, steady. Neither do you. He stormed out, Rebecca following close behind. I didn't move until I heard the slam of their car doors, the roar of the engine as they sped away. Then, finally, I let out a breath. I had won. I had Lily, but I knew Michael, and I knew he wasn't finished. I thought it was over, but I had underestimated just how far my brother was willing to go. I thought I had won. I thought Michael would stop. But I forgot one thing. Monsters never give up that easily. Days passed, and with every sunrise, I told myself it was over. Michael and Rebecca had signed the papers. Lily was finally safe. But deep down, I knew. I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't the end. It started with phone calls. Not from Michael or Rebecca, but from my parents. At first, I ignored them. But when they kept calling, I finally answered. My mother's voice was sharp, filled with rage. How could you do this to your own brother? My father's tone was cold, controlled. You think you're some kind of hero? You've ruined this family. I tightened my grip on the phone. I saved Lily. No, my mother snapped. You stole her. You humiliated Michael. Do you have any idea what you've done? I laughed bitterly. I know exactly what I've done, and I'd do it again. I hung up before she could say another word. Then came the silence. Michael wasn't calling. Rebecca wasn't making threats. There were no angry emails, no legal notices, nothing. For a while, I thought maybe they had given up. But the unease never left me. I started noticing things. A car parked across the street for hours at a time, a figure standing near the building, watching from the shadows. My neighbors mentioned seeing someone lurking around, but they couldn't describe him. At night, I felt eyes on me, like someone was waiting. It was late. Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, clutching her teddy bear. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when the power went out. Darkness swallowed the apartment. I froze, gripping the edge of the sink. There hadn't been any scheduled outages. I reached for my phone to check the power company's website. Nothing. Then I noticed something worse. The security cameras were down. A cold wave of dread rolled through me. And then, the front door burst open. I barely had time to react before a figure charged in, moving fast. Too fast. Michael. Before I could scream, he shoved me, hard. My back hit the counter, pain exploding through my ribs. I gasped, but he wasn't focused on me. He was here for Lily. She woke up to the chaos, her eyes wide with terror. Michael grabbed her wrist and yanked her toward him. "You're coming home," he snarled. Lily thrashed, kicking wildly, but he was stronger. "No, let me go," she sobbed. I forced myself up, dizziness threatening to pull me under. "Michael, stop!" My voice was raw, desperate. He didn't stop. If anything, he tightened his grip. "I'm taking her," he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "And there's nothing you can do about it." I lunged at him, clawing at his arms, trying to pry him off her. But he was stronger. He shoved me away again, harder this time. I crashed into the coffee table, my head snapping back against the wood. Pain exploded through my skull. I reached for my phone, fingers fumbling. But before I could grab it, Michael's boot came down on my hand. A sickening crack echoed through the room. A scream tore from my throat as white-hot agony shot through my fingers. He pressed down, harder, grinding my bones beneath his weight. Lily's screams grew more frantic. "Stop! You're hurting her!" Michael didn't care. He was going to take her. Everything started to fade. My body felt heavy, my breath ragged. "This is it," a dark voice whispered in my head. "He's going to win." Then, a scream. The next few seconds were chaos. Footsteps pounded against the floor. Someone was shouting. A neighbor, a man I barely knew, slammed into Michael from behind. The force sent him stumbling forward, his grip on Lily loosening just enough for her to break free. Another neighbor burst through the door, phone in hand, shouting about the police. Michael roared like a wounded animal, trying to shake them off, but more people rushed in, hands grabbing, holding him back. He struggled, snarling, thrashing like a rabid dog. But it was too late. The distant sound of sirens pierced the air. Michael's face twisted in fury. "You think this is over?" he screamed, his voice wild, unhinged. "You think this is the end?" I forced myself up, cradling my shattered hand, my body trembling. Lily broke free from the chaos and ran straight into my arms. She was sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. "I was so scared," she choked out. I held her tighter than I ever had before, pressing my lips to the top of her head. "It's okay, baby. You're safe. You're safe." The front door burst open, and suddenly there were officers everywhere. They tackled Michael to the ground, wrestling his arms behind his back as he screamed obscenities. I watched as they cuffed him, as they dragged him out of my apartment. His eyes locked onto mine one last time, and in them, I saw something terrifying. He wasn't done. Even as they forced him into the police car, even as the flashing lights painted his face in red and blue, he was still grinning. Like he knew something I didn't. Like he was waiting for the next move. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt true fear. Because I knew. The nightmare wasn't over. I thought Michael was the biggest threat, but I forgot. The system doesn't fight for people like me. The day after Michael's arrest, I thought we had finally won. But then the doorbell rang. 2 social workers stood outside, their expressions unreadable. I let them in, my pulse pounding. Something was wrong. Then they said it. "We are placing both Ethan and Lily into emergency custody." For a second, I didn't understand. "What?" "Number E, Lily is safe here." One of them sighed. "Michael has made accusations against you. He claims you kidnapped Lily and Ethan and have been emotionally abusive toward them." I stared at her, stunned. "That's insane. He broke into my house. He tried to take Lily by force. The woman held up a file. "We have to investigate both sides. Until the case is closed, neither child can remain with you." My heart stopped. "Please," I whispered. "Lily has been through enough. She's safe here." But it didn't matter. Because the system doesn't care about what's right. It cares about procedure. When they came to take Lily, she fought. She screamed, clinging to my shirt, her tiny fingers digging into my skin. "No, I don't want to go. Don't make me go back. Please. Aunt Jane, please." I held her as long as I could, but it wasn't enough. The social workers pried her away, and I watched, helpless, as she was dragged out the door. My body trembled with rage, with grief, with something so deep and primal I could barely breathe. I had fought for her. I had saved her. And in one moment, she was ripped away. Lily was placed with a distant cousin I barely knew. Ethan was sent to live with my parents, the very people who had ignored every warning sign, who had defended Michael to the bitter end. And I? I was banned from seeing them. Not until the investigation was over. Not until the system decided whether or not I was fit to be in their lives. I sat in my silent apartment, staring at my useless broken hand, at the blood-stained floor where Michael had nearly crushed me, and I felt something inside me shatter. I had fought for them. I had risked everything. But in the end, they were still trapped in the same cycle, still tossed between people who didn't deserve them. I had won the battle, but I was losing the war. Michael had broken 2 of my ribs. My hand was bruised and swollen to the point where I couldn't even hold a pen. The doctor said I was lucky I hadn't suffered a concussion, but none of that mattered. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the agony in my heart. The day I was discharged from the hospital, I didn't go home to rest. I didn't wallow in despair. I called a lawyer, the best one I could find. I didn't care how much it cost. I didn't care how long it would take. I had fought too hard to let Lily slip away now. I knew the system was against me. I knew they would doubt me at every turn. But I also knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let Lily end up like me. A week later, I got the call that changed everything. The CPS investigation was complete, and their findings? Michael and Rebecca's claims were completely unfounded. The truth had unraveled in ways I never expected. Ethan had confessed. He admitted Michael and Rebecca had forced him to lie. He told CPS that his parents had coached him, had threatened him, had made him say things about me that weren't true. Teachers came forward, testifying that Lily had arrived at school with bruises, that she had flinched at loud voices, that she had drawn pictures of monsters with her father's face. The neighbor who took Lily to the hospital had given a full statement, exposing just how neglectful Michael and Rebecca had been. In the end, it wasn't just my word against theirs. It was a mountain of evidence that destroyed them. Michael and Rebecca lost all parental rights, permanently. Lily and Ethan were never going back. I got Lily back. But Ethan, I don't know where he belongs. He wants to change. He wants to be better. But years of being raised in that house have left their mark. And worse, Michael isn't gone. He's in jail, but my parents are already fighting to get him released. And Rebecca, she's disappeared. No one knows where she is. No one knows what she's planning. Lily still wakes up in the middle of the night, shaking, clutching my arm like she's afraid I'll vanish. She still flinches at sudden noises, still holds onto her stuffed animals like they're the only things keeping her safe. I thought this was the end, but it's not. This was only the beginning of another battle. I thought that once Michael was locked away, it would all be over. But I was wrong. Some wounds don't heal easily, and some demons don't disappear. A week after Michael's arrest, there was a knock at my door. It was late, and Lily was already asleep. I hesitated before opening it, my body still tense after everything that had happened. But when I did, I froze. Ethan stood there. He looked different. Thinner, hollowed out, his usual arrogance nowhere to be seen. His eyes, once so full of smug superiority, now held nothing but guilt. For the first time in his life, Ethan had lost everything. His parents, his home, his security. He was just a scared, broken child standing in the cold. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. But then, without warning, he fell to his knees. His voice cracked as he spoke, his words barely above a whisper. "Can you forgive me?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to slam the door in his face and tell him that he deserved to suffer for everything he had done to Lily. But when I looked at him, really looked at him, I didn't see the boy who had tormented his sister. I saw a child who had been raised by monsters. A boy who had been taught cruelty instead of love. Something inside him had shattered, and I knew that if I pushed him away now, he would be lost forever. I took a slow breath. "Ethan, I don't know if I can forgive you, but I do know that you don't have to be like them." His shoulders shook, and for the first time since I had known him, Ethan cried. No matter how much he regretted his past, CPS decided that Ethan and Lily needed to be separated for their own healing. A distant cousin of mine, living in another city, had offered to take him in. When I told him, he didn't argue. Maybe he knew it was for the best. Before he left, he turned to me, his voice quiet but firm. I know I was awful. I don't expect you to believe me, but I want to fix things. I want to be better. I studied him for a long moment. Did I believe him? I wasn't sure, but I nodded anyway. Then prove it. Ethan gave a small, sad smile and walked away. I didn't know if I would ever see him again. Everything fell apart. Michael was facing multiple charges: assault, child abuse, breaking and entering. Rebecca had disappeared completely, abandoning her children without a second thought. My parents, once so proud of their golden son, were now drowning in disgrace. But instead of blaming him, they turned their anger on me. You destroyed our family, my mother spat the last time she called. You humiliated your own brother. I didn't even argue. I was done trying to make them see the truth. They had made their choice. And now, so had I. They had turned their backs on Lily. Now I was turning my back on them. One night, long after I thought the worst was behind us, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. My stomach tightened as I answered. A voice I knew too well spoke on the other end. You think you've won? Michael. A chill ran down my spine. How are you calling me? He chuckled, low and bitter. You took everything from me. My family, my career, my life. Do you really think I'll let you get away with it? I gripped the phone tighter, my heart pounding. You did this to yourself. His voice darkened. This isn't over. The line went dead. I stood there, gripping the phone, my breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. I had saved Lily. I had fought for Ethan. I had torn down the people who had hurt them. But Michael wasn't gone, and I knew, deep in my gut, the real fight was only just beginning. I spent my life writing stories about love. But now I know, some stories don't get a happy ending, unless I create it myself. Michael thought he could scare me into silence. He was wrong. The moment I put the phone down, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. He had already taken too much from me, from Lily, from Ethan, and I was going to make sure he never had the chance to hurt anyone again. I hired the best lawyer I could find. I worked with the police, handing over every piece of evidence I had. And then, I did something Michael never expected. I went public. I told the world everything. I wrote a detailed account of what had happened, exposing Michael and Rebecca's abuse, the neglect, the lies, the pain they had inflicted on their own children. I posted it everywhere, social media, online news platforms. The story spread like wildfire. People were outraged. Reporters picked it up. Suddenly, there were cameras outside the courthouse, journalists demanding answers. Michael's name was everywhere, but not in the way he had always wanted. With all eyes on him, there was no escaping this time. The law came down on him hard. His past was dug up, his actions scrutinized. And just when his lawyers tried to fight back, more victims stepped forward. Former employees, past acquaintances, people he had bullied, manipulated, silenced. They weren't afraid anymore. Neither was I. Michael was arrested again. And this time, he wasn't getting out. No amount of money, no favors, no connections could save him now. He had lost. And this time, it was forever. For the first time, Lily had a real family. She was officially adopted by my cousin, who gave her a home filled with love, patience, and warmth. She had a bedroom of her own, decorated with fairy lights and bookshelves filled with stories she loved. She had laughter, security, and most importantly, a childhood. Ethan was given a fresh start too. He moved to a different city, away from the shadow of his parents, away from everything that had poisoned him. He started therapy, trying to undo years of damage. One day, I received a letter from him. Jane, I don't know if you'll ever believe me, but I'm trying. I don't want to be like him. I know I hurt Lily. I know I can't change the past. But I want to change the future. Thank you for giving me a second chance. I won't waste it. I didn't know if Ethan would ever truly heal. But for the first time, I had hope. I severed all ties with my old life. No more Michael, no more Rebecca. No more parents who never cared, who only saw me as a disappointment. I packed my things, left behind the apartment where so much had happened, and moved to a quiet place where no one knew me. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. I wasn't Lily's mother, but I was the one who had saved her. I wasn't Ethan's hero, but I was the one who had given him a second chance, and that was enough. One evening, as I sat by my window, watching the sky turn golden with the sunset, my phone rang. Lily's name flashed on the screen. I answered, smiling. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hi, Aunt Jane." Her voice was bright, filled with something I hadn't heard in a long time. Happiness. "I just wanted to tell you, I'm really happy. I love my new school. I love my new room. And I love my new family. I just wanted to say thank you." I felt my throat tighten, tears slipping down my cheeks. "You don't have to thank me. Baby, I love you," she giggled. "I love you too." As the call ended, I looked out at the horizon, where the sun dipped below the clouds, painting the sky in hues of red and gold. For so long, I had fought. I had bled, I had suffered, I had lost so much. But now, it was finally over. I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, letting the weight of it all finally lift. And now, I can finally move on.